We spend the rest of the hour with acclaimed Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy on the dark underbelly of India, a country that prides itself on being known as the world's largest democracy. Earlier this month, when Forbes published its annual list of the world's billionaires, the Indian press reported with some delight that 2 of their countrymen had made it to the coveted list of the 10 richest individuals in the world. Meanwhile, thousands of Indian paramilitary troops and police are fighting a war against some of its poorest inhabitants living deep in the country's so-called tribal belt. Indian officials say more than a third of the country, mostly mineral-rich forest land, is partially or completely under the control of Maoist rebels, also known as Naxalites. India's Prime Minister has called the Maoists the country's gravest internal security threat. According to official figures, nearly 6,000 people have died in the past 7 years of fighting, more than half of them civilians. The government's new paramilitary offensive against the Maoists has been dubbed Operation Green Hunt. Well, earlier this month, the leader of the Maoist insurgency, Kureshwar Rao, or Kishanji, invited the Booker Prize-winning novelist Arundhati Roy to mediate in peace talks with the government.
Arundhati Roy recently had a rare journalistic encounter with the armed guerrillas in the forests of central India. She spent a few weeks traveling with the insurgency deep in India's Maoist heartland and wrote about their struggle in a 20,000-word essay published this weekend in the Indian magazine Outlook. It's called Walking with the Comrades. We're joined now here in New York by the world-renowned author and global justice activist. She won the Lannan Foundation Cultural Freedom Prize in 2002 and is the author of a number of books, including the Booker Prize-winning novel, The God of Small Things. Her latest collection of essays, published by Haymarket, is Field Notes on Democracy, Listening to Grasshoppers. Arundhati Roy, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy.
Start by talking about what's happening in the forests of India. What is this war that India is waging against some of the poorest people known as tribals, indigenous people, Adivasis? Who are the Maoists? What's happening there? And how did you get there?
Well, it's been going on for a while, but basically, there is a connection. If you look at Afghanistan, Waziristan, the northeast states of India, and this whole mineral belt that goes from West Bengal through Jharkhand, through Odisha to Chhattisgarh, what's called the Red Corridor in India. It's interesting that the entire thing is a tribal uprising. In Afghanistan, obviously, it's taken the form of radical Islamist uprising, and here it's a radical left uprising. But the attack is the same. It's a corporate attack, on these people. The resistance has taken different forms. But in India, this thing known as the Red Corridor. If you look at a map of India, the tribal people, the forests, the minerals, and the Maoists are all stacked on top of each other. So, and in the last 5 years, the governments of these various states have signed MOUs with mining corporations worth billions of dollars. It was interesting that a lot of these MOUs were signed in 2005. And at that time, it was just after this Congress government had come to power, and the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh announced that the Maoists are India's gravest internal security threat. And it was very odd that he should have said that then, because the Maoists had actually just been decimated in the state of Andhra Pradesh. I think they had killed something like 1,600 of them. But the minute he said this, the shares in the mining companies went up, because obviously it was a signal that the government was prepared to do something about this. And then started this assault on them, which ended up as Operation Green Hunt, which is where now tens of thousands of paramilitary troops are moving into these tribal areas. But before Operation Green Hunt, they tried another thing, which was that they armed a sort of tribal militia and backed by police in a state like Chhattisgarh, where I was traveling recently. They just went into the forest. This militia burned village after village after village, like something like 640 villages were more or less emptied. And it was the plan was what's known as strategic hamleting, which the Americans tried in Vietnam, which was first devised by the British in Malaya, where you try and force people to move into police wayside camps so that you can control them, and the villages are emptied so that the forests are open for the corporates to go. And what happened actually was that in this area in Chhattisgarh, out of say 350,000 people, about 50,000 people moved into the camp. Some were forced, some went voluntarily, and the rest just went off the government radar. Many of them went to other states to work as migrant labor, but many of them just continued to hide in the forests, unable to come back to their homes, but not wanting to leave. But the fact is that in this entire area, the Maoists have been there for 30 years, working with people and so on. So it's not a resistance that has risen up against mining. It preceded that a long time, by a long time. So it's very entrenched. And Operation Green Hunt has been announced because this militia called the Salva Jurum failed. So now they are upping the ante, because these MOUs are waiting, and the mining corporations are not used to being made to wait, So there's a lot of money waiting. And I mean, what I want to say is that we are not using this word genocidal war lightly or rhetorically. But I travel in that area, and what you see is the poorest people of this country who have been outside the purview of the state. There's no hospital, there's no clinic, there's no education, there's nothing, And now there's a kind of siege where people can't go out of their villages to the market to buy anything, because the markets are full of informers who are pointing out, this person is with the resistance and so on. There's no doctors, there's no medical help. People are suffering from extreme hunger, malnutrition. So it's not just killing, it's not just going out there and burning and killing, but it's also laying siege to a very vulnerable population, cutting them off from their resources, and putting them under grievous threat. And this is a democracy, so how do you clear the land for corporates in a democracy? You can't actually go and murder people, but you create a situation in which they either have to leave or they starve to death.
In your piece, you described the people you traveled with, the armed guerrillas, as Gandhians with guns. Can you talk about what you mean by that, and what you think of the violence perpetrated by the Maoists?
Well, this is a very sharp debate in India about, even the sort of mainstream left and the liberal intellectuals are very, very suspicious of Maoists, and everybody should be suspicious of Maoists, because, they have had a very difficult past, and there are a lot of things that their ideologues say which do put a chill down your spine. But when I went there, I have to say I was shocked at what I saw, because in the last 30 years, I think something has radically changed among them. And the one thing is that in India, people try and make this difference. They say there's the Maoists and then there's the tribals. Actually, the Maoists are tribals, and the tribals themselves have had a history of resistance and rebellion that predates Mao by centuries, And so I think it's just a name in a way. It's just a name. And yet, without that organization, the tribal people could not have put up this resistance. So it is complicated. But when I went in, I lived with them for, and I walked with them for a long time. And it's an army that is more Gandhian than any Gandhian, that leaves a lighter footprint than any climate change evangelist. And as I said, even their sabotage techniques are Gandhian. They waste nothing. They live on nothing. And to the outside world, First of all, the media has been lying about them for a long time. A lot of the incidents of violence did not happen, which I figured out. A lot of them did happen, and there was a reason for why they happened. And what I actually wanted to ask people was, when you talk about nonviolent resistance, I myself have spoken about that. I myself have said that women will be the victims of an armed struggle. And when I went in, I found the opposite to be true. I found that 50% of the armed cadre were women. And a lot of the reason they joined was because for 30 years, the Maoists had been working with women there. It was a women's organization which has 90,000 members, which is probably the biggest feminist organization in India. Now, all 90,000 of those women are surely Maoists, and the government has given itself the right to shoot on sight. So are they going to shoot these 90,000 people?
Arundhati Roy, the leader of the Maoists, has asked you to be the negotiator, the mediator between them and the Indian government. What is your response?
Look, I wouldn't be a good mediator. Those are not my skills. I think that somebody should do it, but I don't think that it should be me, because I have no idea how to mediate, and I don't think that we should be jumping into things that we don't know much about, and I certainly, I did say that, I mean, I don't know why they mentioned my name, but I think there are people in India who have those skills and who could do it, because it's very, very urgent that this Operation Green Hunt be called off. Very, very urgent, but it would be silly for someone like me to enter that, because I think I'm too impatient, I'm too much of a maverick, I don't have those skills.